Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host today, Jason Roberts, and I'm looking forward to hearing the reading today for the Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Uh, but before we get into the reading, I want to just give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves and if you would please take it away.
Lori Emmons in Denver.
Dan Sisek in sunny Las Vegas.
Hello, this is Catherine Clement, and I'll be the reader. If I get it pulled back up, I had it. It took off on me. Okay, here we go. So this section is called Tricycle. As the weeks went by, Nora began to feel something remarkable start to happen. She began to remember aspects of her life that she had never actually lived. For instance, one day, someone she had never known in her root life, a friend she had apparently known while studying and teaching at the university, phoned her about meeting for lunch. And as the caller, Laura, came up on the phone, a name came to her, Laura Bryan, and she pictured her completely and somehow knew her partner was called Mo and that they had a baby called Aldous. And then she met her and had all these things confirmed. This sort of deja vu happened increasingly. Yes, of course, there were the occasional slip ups she made, like forgetting Ash had asthma, which he tried to keep under control via running. How long have you had it? Since I was 7. Oh, yes, of course. I thought you'd said eczema. Nora, are you okay? Yes, fine. It's just I had some wine with Laura at lunch and I feel a bit spaced out. But slowly, these slip ups became less frequent. It was as though each day was a piece fitting into a puzzle, and with each piece added, it became easier to know what the absent pieces were going to look like. Whereas in every other life, she had been continually grasping for clues and feeling like she was acting. In this one, she increasingly found that the more she relaxed into it, the more things came to her. Nora also loved spending time with Molly. The cozy anarchy of her playing in her bedroom, or the delicate bonding that happened at story time, reading the simple magical brilliance of The Tiger Who Came to Tea, or hanging out in the garden. Watch me, Mummy, said Molly as she pedaled away on her tricycle one Saturday morning. Mummy, look, are you watching? That's very good, Molly. Good pedaling. Mummy, look, zoomy. Go, Molly. But then the front wheel of the tricycle slipped off the lawn and down into the flower bed. Molly fell off and knocked her head hard on a small rock. Nora rushed over and picked her up and had a look at her. Molly was clearly hurt, with a scrape on her forehead. The skin grazed and bleeding, but she didn't want to show it, even as her chin wobbled. I'm all right, she said, slowly, in a voice as fragile as porcelain. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. Each all right got progressively closer to tears, then horseshoed back around to calm again. For all her nocturnal fears about bears, she had a resilience to her that Nora couldn't help but admire and be inspired by. This little human being had come from her, was in some way a part of her, and if she had hidden strength, then maybe Nora did too. Nora hugged her. It's all right, baby, my brave girl. It's okay. How does it feel now, darling? It's okay. It's like on holiday. On holiday? Yes, Mummy, she said, a little upset. Nora couldn't remember. The slide. Oh, yes, of course, the slide. Yes, silly me. Silly Mummy. Nora felt something inside her all at once. Kind of fear. As real as the fear she had felt on the Arctic skerry. Face to face with the polar bear. a fear of what she was feeling. Love. You could eat in the finest restaurants. You could partake in every sensual pleasure. You could sing on stage in Sao Paulo to 20,000 people. You could soak up whole thunderstorms of applause. You could travel to the ends of the earth. You could be followed by millions on the internet. You could win Olympic medals. But this was all meaningless without love. And when she thought of her root life, the fundamental problem with it, the thing that had left her vulnerable really, was the absence of love. Even her brother hadn't wanted her in that life. There had been no one once Volz had died. She had loved no one, and no one had loved her back. She had been empty. Her life had been empty, walking around faking some kind of human normality like a sentient mannequin of despair, just the bare bones of getting through. Yet there, right there in that garden in Cambridge, under that dull gray sky, she felt the power of it, the terrifying power of caring deeply and being cared for deeply. Okay, her parents were still dead in this life, but here there was Molly, there was Ash, there was Joe, there was a net of love to break her fall. And yet, she sensed deep down that it would all come to an end soon. She sensed that, for all the perfection here, there was something wrong amid the rightness. And the thing that was wrong couldn't be fixed because the flaw was the rightness itself. Everything was right. And yet she hadn't earned this. She had joined the movie halfway. She had taken the book from the library, but truthfully, she didn't own it. She was watching her life as if from behind a window. She began to feel, a fraud. She wanted this to be her life, as in her real life, and it wasn't, and she just wished she could forget that fact. She really did. Mummy, are you crying? No, Molly, no, Mummy's fine. You look like you're crying. Let's just get you cleaned up. Later that day, Molly pieced together a jigsaw of jungle animals. Nora sat on the sofa, stroking Plato as his warm, weighty head rested on her lap. She stared at the ornate chess set that was sitting there on the mahogany chest. A thought rose slowly, and she dismissed it. And then it rose again. As soon as Ash came home, she told him she wanted to see an old friend from Bedford and wouldn't be back for a few hours. No longer here. Do you want me to continue, or are we going to stop and talk? Continue? Okay. No longer here. As soon as Nora entered Oakleaf Residential Care Home, and before she'd even reached the reception, she saw a frail elderly man wearing glasses whom she recognized. He was having a slightly heated conversation with a nurse who looked exasperated, like a sigh turned into a human. I really would like to go in the garden, the old man said. I'm sorry, but the garden is being used today. I just want to sit on the bench and read the newspaper. Maybe if you had signed up for the gardening activity session. I don't want a gardening session. I want to call Davik. This was all a mistake. Nora had heard her old neighbor talk about his son Davik before when she had dropped off his medication. Apparently, his son had been pushing for him to go to a care home, but Mr. Banerjee had insisted on holding onto his house. Is there no way I can just... He noticed at this point that he was being stared at. Mr. Banerjee? He stared at Nora, confused. Hello? Who are you? I'm Nora. You know, Nora Seed. Then, feeling too flustered to think, she added, I'm your neighbor on Bancroft Avenue. He shook his head. I think you've made a mistake, dear. I haven't lived there for 3 years, and I'm very sure you are not my neighbor. The nurse tilted her head at Mr. Banerjee, as if he was a confused puppy. Maybe you've forgotten. No, said Nora quickly, realizing her mistake. He was right. I was confused. I have memory issues sometimes. I never lived there. It was somewhere else and someone else. I'm sorry. They resumed their conversation as Nora thought about Mr. Banerjee's front garden full of irises and foxgloves. Can I help you? She turned to look at the receptionist, a mild-mannered, red-haired man with glasses and blotched skin and a gentle Scottish accent. She told him who she was and that she had phoned earlier. He was a little confused at first. And you say you left a message? He hummed a quiet tune as he searched for her email. Yes, but on the phone. I was trying for ages to get through, and I couldn't, so I eventually left a message. I emailed as well. Ah, right, I see. Well, I'm sorry about that. Are you here to see a family member? No, Nora explained. I'm not family. I'm just someone who used to know her. She'd know me, though. Her name is Mrs. Elm. Nora tried to remember the full name. Sorry, it's Louise Elm. If you told her my name, Nora Seed, she used to be she was the school librarian at Hazeldine. I just thought she might like some company. The man stopped looking at his computer and stared up at Nora with barely suppressed surprise. At first, Nora thought that she had got it wrong, or Dylan had got it wrong that evening at La Catina, or maybe the Mrs. Elm in that life had experienced a different fate in this life, though Nora didn't quite know how her own decision to work in an animal shelter would have led to a different outcome for Mrs. Elm in this life. But that made no sense, as in neither life had she been in touch with the librarian since school. What's the matter? Nora asked the receptionist. I'm ever so sorry to tell you this, but Louise Elm is no longer here. Where is she? She died 3 weeks ago. At first, she thought it must be an admin error. Are you sure? Yes, I'm afraid I'm very sure. Oh, said Nora. She didn't really know what to say or to feel. She looked down at her tote bag that had sat beside her in the car, a bag containing the chess set she had brought to play a game with her and to keep her company. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't. You see, I haven't seen her for years, years and years, but I heard from someone who said that she was here. So sorry, the receptionist said. No, no worries. I just wanted to thank her for being so kind to me. She died very peacefully, he said, literally in her sleep. And Nora smiled and retreated politely away. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for looking after her. I'll just go now. Bye. I think we can talk about that. That changes things a lot for Nora. And welcome, Kenneth. I'm so glad you could join us. This is the part where we talk about what I just read, which you got to hear part of it, and you're not familiar with the book, but it's basically a book about a library where a girl gets to go in and choose all these different lives. All the books are different lives. And so she's kind of like reincarnating, but not really, because she's actually being resuscitated. She's in the in-between world right now, having all these experiences. So it's an interesting book, the first fiction book that we've read.
Yeah, I was gonna jump out because it's interesting how with Tricycles, the chapter just before this, how she's letting her guard down, and I think that's something that's kind of like with all of us. We all tend to have our guards up until when we first get around people and things like that. But Nora always seems to have a guard up no matter what. And I think that's part of the reason why maybe she was allowed while she's being resuscitated to check out these different lives to give her a slight sense of maybe of what could have been, even though once she either passes on or is resuscitated, then it may have a bearing on what her life becomes. But, and in this case, we're in Tricycle, but it seems like that life is closest to, I think, what the type of life she's been wanting, where she feels she's allowing herself to start to love and is letting love in, even though I think she's been loved all along in her root life. She just never opened up to it. And with this happening in Tricycle, based on, I think her daughter's the catalyst, I think, for all that. And I think the women here on the panel can probably, speak more to that, that bond that mothers have with their children, from pretty much the minute they're born or even in the womb. It's a unique bond, but sometimes, like for me with my real mom, I don't have that bond. I ended up kind of getting it with my grandmother and then with my aunt down here. But I think that's what she's been looking for all along, is that believe that she's unconditionally loved, that we all look for. And then in finding out about Mrs. Elm, I think Mrs. Elm was released in a sense, maybe in this life, because Nora is starting to slip into this life, maybe. So that's what came up for me.
Well, I wonder if Mrs. Elm is still in the Midnight Library since she's gone in this life. Is the Midnight Library even an option for Nora to go back to?
I think she chose this life, so that's where she'll stay, and that she won't be going back to the library. If she chose that life and has a daughter and it's not going to run away from it this time.
I don't know. It seems like she's having second thoughts about it for some reason, I thought, towards the end there. But it did seem like, to me, like it was the best fit so far, except towards the end there, she was saying that what was the word? And she felt like an imposter or something. No.
Well, I think bouncing off what you two are saying, that she was opening up and allowing herself to, like it said, she was feeling the love that she's always craved. And but then when that started to happen and she started to realize what that was doing, somehow she thought of Mrs. Elm. And I think she deep down kind of likes to have that escape, to being able to say, oh well, and to not fully immerse herself into whatever life is going on. Kind of like, in her root life, she didn't really put out in any one main, anywhere, and I think that's what led to her being the way she felt. But now that she realizes that in this life, Mrs. Elm is no longer alive, I think that's where the question comes in. It's like, oh no, what if I find out that this isn't the life? Can I go back and keep searching? And maybe that's something that we all tend to do even in our own lives. We start going down, and maybe that's part of where regrets come in. Maybe when we go down certain paths and we live our lives and we, make the decisions and things happen, and then we get to certain points where if we make a decision, we could go one way or the other, but then we start looking back and we can look back at certain points where we could have taken a whole nother juncture and our life might have been different. And I think that's, I think that's kind of where she's at here, where she's like, oh, well, if I continue on, will I still have some of this, or will that even change? Or can I go back and try something else out?
Wouldn't it be nice if life was that easy to just, oops, I made a mistake, I'm gonna go a different way? And
Sometimes it is, but sometimes not so much. Kenneth, just to give you a little background, like we're a group of friends. We've been doing this about 10 years and we've read tons of different books and um, on all different subjects. But most of us, if not all of us in here, believe in reincarnation and possibly, I know many of us believe that we choose our lives, that we come down here and we choose who we come down here to spend time with. And this is an interesting fiction book, but it aligns with a lot of our spiritual beliefs about things as well in an aspect, not exactly the way that this book is portrayed, but just the thought that you can choose different lives and um, choose the people you're going to be with and how those different interconnections weave back and forth through the matrix or the complexity of the universe. Who the heck knows? Like, I don't understand all that, but there definitely seems to be more to life than what we've been told by mainstream. And this girl, she keeps flipping in and out. Her root life, which is the life that she started with in the beginning of this book, she was extremely depressed and just didn't feel like she served any purpose whatsoever. She couldn't even keep her cat alive. Like she was just very downtrodden. And so she commits suicide, or she attempts to, and they're in the process of resuscitating her. While that happens, she gets thrown into this library with all these books, and Mrs. Elm is the librarian who assists her as she decides which book she's going to read. There was a book of regrets that had all the regrets that she had in it. So many would liken this library that they talk about as like the Akashic records, if you've heard that term, and the ability to, that every life is recorded and you can go back and review those things. And these, again, are spiritual concepts being put out in a fiction book. But um, it's now that Mrs. Elm, the librarian, has died in this life, we're not sure if she can go back and choose again, or she's just kind of stuck. And like Jason was saying, she's she has some unsettlings about this life as well. She doesn't seem to be able to commit to much, does she? Like she really thinks she wants something. I'm kind of like that. I really think I want something and I go after it hardcore, and then I decide I didn't think it through all the way in the beginning, like there's too much for certain businesses that I've tried. It turns out to be too time consuming, where it needs to be more passive and different things like that. But yeah, Nora is trying to figure out which life is best for her. And she kind of has it in her mind that she wants certain people there and they need to be playing certain roles. And seems to be hard for her to kind of settle in and just accept the life that she's in at the moment. it seems to me like she, as many lives as she's gone through at this point, she would have kind of learned just to relax a little bit and go with the flow, because there's always another one after this one. So it's not like we have to get it all right in this one particular life, because we're going to have many, many, many more chances.
You just said something, Catherine, that kind of hit me. That Nora, in her lives, she, like I said, she seems to want to have certain people there and have them fit certain ideas of what she thinks what she wants them to be and how she wants them to fit into her life. But, and I think we as, you know, humans, ourselves, I think we tend to do that with the people and the interactions of the people we deal with. It's like, why can't you be more like this? Or why can't you do it that way? Or even with our family members, but yet when we know they've always been this way, and yet we still deep down want to try to change everybody else to fit what we want them to fit, rather than allowing and accepting and letting that be, and learning to let ourselves be a little more fluid. And I'm not meaning, fluid, I'm meaning more like, in ourselves of how we interact with them, because we have our characteristics that I'm sure other people are looking at us and saying, well, why can't you be more like this? Or why can't you fit this? Or why can't you fit into my life this way? And it's that constant, yin and yang type thing, back and forth, push pull. But that also helps, I think, what makes our lives different, interesting, puts in the highs and the lows and all that, and gives us the opportunity to then look at those and hopefully make decisions that will help further our path in the direction that we would like it to go. But sometimes we make those decisions or go certain directions, like you said, not fully looking at where it could lead down the road. And then when we get there, we're like, oh, why? I want to go back. I want to change. I want to make this and go back that way. But yet we're already way over here, and it's harder to get back to where. So that was just interesting when you said that. It just really made me, now I have to look at other people a little differently now, hopefully.
Yeah, it seems like Nora is really analyzing every life path that she's in so much, um, and a lot in the same way that she did in the beginning of the book, but she's so introspective, and in her first appearance of the book, doesn't seem like she has a whole lot of friends that she's able to discuss anything with, and maybe that's part of the issue. And part of the issue, I guess, is that she doesn't have any mindset mastery help, anything to help her, to guide her through and help her get out of that tailspin that she seems to be in. It's sort of like every life path that she enters, there's nothing, um, there's no real philosophy um, that she is following in each life path that might help her to guide her, one way or the other. It's just sort of how she feels, and her perception in the moment, that seems to be very, she tries, each time she jumps into a life, she has to re kind of fit in and figure out what that life is about, what her role is in the life, rather than just being herself and getting into the flow and kind of losing herself into in the moment and just living and so it's almost as she's, like you said, there's that push pull, Dan. I appreciate that, because it's with her, it's almost like a she's creating some uh, um, repelling force between herself and her accepting the way her life, way that life path is, and that is sort of creating just enough, um, just enough to make her feel that she is got that sort of imposter feeling and doesn't quite belong there.
What do you guys think of Nora's feelings and thoughts about Mrs. Elm as the librarian? Because now she's not alive. What do you think? Because I think that's a central figure for her and a catalyst for her. And now, based on this, where she's at with her not being alive, how do you think that's going to really truly affect her and her decisions and what she decides to do going forward?
Well, that's interesting, because I don't know that in the beginning of the book, it didn't seem like um, that really mattered all that much as to, she's a character in the book, but I think to me, it just seemed as though that was uh, that she was the librarian because of um, the part she had played in her previous life, but it wasn't a necessity. It wasn't her role to be the Midnight Library librarian. Um, so I don't think it really would. I don't think it's going to matter too much, but I could be wrong.
And I think in the beginning it started out that way, but I think as she's gone through all these lives and she keeps going back, and the time where she played chess and sat and talked with her, this person seems to be the only person she bounced off what she was feeling and some of the things she was going through. And I think as she kept going through the different lives, I think she has become more of a pivotal person. And I think deep down that she kind of has developed feelings in the sense of a friend or someone she kind of cares about. Because look how she reacted when she started thinking about it, like, oh, I need to go see her. I need to, you know, I think that role has changed for Nora in regards to Mrs. Elm.
Yeah, could be.
But I don't know. That's why I threw it out there. You guys might have other thoughts, and I could be totally wrong.
I don't think there's any right or wrong. It's what everyone goes through. They have confidants, not necessarily having confidence in their confidants. If I said that clearly.
And Kenneth, as I said in the chat, if you have any thoughts or anything, you can jump out, even if we always welcome any other thoughts or ideas. You may get something out of this that we may not have thought of. So, please, if you want to, if you don't have to, you can still just listen in. But we love encouraging and welcoming other people and their thoughts also.
I thought it was interesting. I was trying to find it again, her comment about like she was just watching her life. I feel like that a lot. Sometimes purposefully because I have to disassociate from the pain, so I kind of pop out of my body. But it does, um, I can understand that statement about just kind of, I am witnessing my life more than living it many times. Um, I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying I've observed that about myself. And, we can look at all the different things we've tried in our lives as different lives, even within this one, or it kind of feels like that to me, because when you're going through it, it feels like it's an eternity. And then when it's over and you're looking back at it, it seems like it was just a brief moment in time. But each one of those things, like being a nurse to me now seems like a whole different lifetime, or even being a student, even though I'm a lifelong student. I just study every day to kind of keep my mind on other things and occupied, and it's a good distraction. Um, and I just find so many interesting things to learn about. But being there's many things in my life that I look back at, and you can what if it to death, but then there's also those moments where you're just so in sync with everything, you absolutely know without a doubt that everything in your life up to this moment has happened for a reason. You might not be able to say what it is or why it is, or whether it was pre-planned or just an act of free will, or what it was that brought it about, but you just know because you're so in sync that everything had to happen exactly as it had for this moment to be like this. And our lifetimes really are moments. I think in this book, they're still resuscitating her because we've been reading many, many lives that she's gone through now. And yet she's still being resuscitated, which means it's only been minutes. Time is it's like air. You can't, like, it's so malleable, and you can't really contain it. It stretches and it shrinks, and I don't know, if you do a lot of meditation, I think you get it, how weird time is.
Kenneth asked in the chat, and let me pull it back up. He was asking, and she's unaware of her previous lives. And I'm going to say that it's kind of yes and no. She knows she's been in other lives while she's being resuscitated, and she remembers, I think, parts of the other lives, but when she keeps going back to the library, she keeps going back because she's looking based off of what I think we've all assumed is she's trying to find out one perfect life that she thinks is what her life would be perfect in that way, and how she thinks it should be. Just like we all have ideas of what our lives in our heads, we think, oh, my life is going to be this, and then most of the time it turns out something totally way off in a whole different direction. And so I think that for her, it's, she knows the bits and pieces of, I think, the one, she was an Olympic gold medalist, but she realized that was because of how that played out, and, certain things. Because, like we said, she wants certain people there and involved, and to still be there and in her life. But I think just kind of like how she sees it, how she wants it to be.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
if she returns to the root life and they resuscitate her, I don't think she'll remember any of these lives. But while she's going back and forth to the library, she does seem to have some recollection of the previous ones that she's experienced recently.
Yeah, because
It would
that
be
polar
good if we
bear
had that.
reference.
What'd
Yeah,
you say, Jason?
I'm sorry, that polar bear reference that she made, that was from a previous life where she was a glaciologist, and she, in this life path, she, talks to Ash, her husband, and says, talks about how in another life, he buried her cat, and it's interesting because there's similar events in each life path, but they don't all lead to the same things, obviously. And really, it seems that she is kind of jumping from one life path to another, um, not really knowing what she's getting into. Um, she just I'm not sure what her intention is each time she picks a book. It's maybe just a feeling she has, and then she's in that life. Um, Apparently, at one point in the book, she's told that when she decides on the life, that she will slowly forget all the other memories. So once she
And the
chooses.
books don't have titles. They just had colors, remember? They didn't have any titles or like picture, like when I choose a book, I
Mm.
kind of looking at the outside of the book to see if anything appeals to me about it for some reason, the cover. But these books just were different shades of green, weren't they? I think they were all different shades of green or something.
I think
So she
so.
doesn't know what she's picking when she picks one. She has no idea. I like to think that we get to choose exactly what we want and plan it out as opposed to just picking a random something off of a shelf and going for it.
Maybe in that, different shades of green and no cover, maybe that is sort of a reference to that it really doesn't matter what book she picks, because she's um, subconsciously going into the life path that she wants, or being directed into it somehow. Like I think there was also a part where somewhere in the library, a certain section was, um, there was something uh, that clarified what part of the library she was in, or something like that. But I think I do believe I remember correctly in that once she experiences a life path, and she um, decides against it, she can never go back to that life path.
Yeah, she can't repeat lives. That's a good, I forgot about that. She can't repeat lives. And she's had lives where, like she had a life where she lived her life to please her father, which many people can relate to, you know, that they're living their life for somebody else's dreams, whether it's a father or mother or whoever. And one life um she just wanted to be near her friend over in Australia who wound up getting killed. Like, she goes into some of these lives with certain intentions, but then it doesn't quite play out exactly like she expects it to when she gets in there. One life she was, like Jason said, she was a glaciologist and came face to face with a polar bear and almost got eaten. And there's been some pretty exciting ones.
Yeah. Well, and in the beginning, it seemed like she was more concerned about how what she had decided to do in her first life had affected the people she loved, and so it seemed as though she was interested in looking into the life paths that where her decisions were different, and where she may have had a little bit better outcome, um, in relationship with her brother, or like you said, with her father, um, you know, or had a successful band or something like that. So, and now it seems a little like they're going towards, like she's figuring out that not all that other stuff matters as much if she can just have the love that she has really been wanting. So that's in that aspect, it just seems like her ideals are becoming more clear, I think.
Interesting you said that because, oh, go ahead, Lori, jump out.
I wasn't planning to say anything right then. Go
You were
ahead.
unmuted. You were unmuted, so I was gonna let you. So okay, I was gonna
I'm
say,
I'm always unmuted. I don't mess with that.
oh, okay. Um, interesting what you were saying, Jason, because I can even speak from my own personal experience of, I've lived a little bit for other people. I've done that. I've uh am now at a point where, looking back at my life, I'm wanting to kind of, and I've said this before, I'm working on kind of getting a little more connected with, my real mother. But even then, that still, I keep it at a very certain distance, and but um, because I'm wanting to kind of close some of that up in how I now see that aspect of that part of my life. And I've had some changes in how my thoughts were compared to when I was a child and living through it. So interesting, but yeah, I've always wanted to find that all-encompassing love. I think that she's kind of, and I'm realizing that first, some of that I've got to love myself enough first, in that aspect. And I think that's part of her growing in this. I think she's finally in this life starting to love herself, which then opens her door for, like with her daughter, the feelings that she's having for her daughter, and more of the relaxing and allowing more of this life to unfold and take hold to where she's remembering, like that one friend that was, from when she taught, and the name come up and she's like, oh, that's so and so, and this is that. And then when she met, got confirmed. So I, on that end, I kind of get that. And it kind of helps make a little sense for me because I've been kind of on a lot of the past too. And I realize that now.
Has she learned to love herself yet, though? Because, it's pretty overstated all the time, but like if you can't love yourself, you can't love somebody else. But it's so true because you can't accept love. It's very challenging to accept love from somebody else if you can't even give it to yourself.
It's hard to trust it. You can't, I don't think unconditional love is humanly possible because we all have our egos and our sensitivities and our blockages and challenges that we faced and how it affects everything else. It's just constantly changing, complex circumstances.
Kenneth wrote, I think each life is random, but that too is part of the process and texture of the entirety of our lives.
I like that word texture because it's definitely not smooth.
Yeah, and there's that contrast in the yin and yang that Dan was mentioning earlier, that not only can throw us for a loop, sometimes add more texture than we might want, but also makes life interesting, and maybe even gives it more meaning.
Because I don't think, I mean, I guess that's a good way to say it, is I don't know that any of us, none of us got here by ourselves. We had all our baggage from past experiences, the way you're brought up, excuse me, the way you're raised, the circumstances there, and their whole, your parents' ideologies and parenting methods and circumstances, everything affects it. And we didn't get here by ourselves, and it all has an impact.
Yeah, I something has brought up the idea in my mind about how we have these emotional bonds, and that you know how different our lives might be if we were able to um, break those emotional bonds and just go off and do something that we wouldn't do otherwise. Like, for instance, if you have a very tight family structure, and then you don't want to go off and live somewhere else, or do a lot of other things out in the world because you want to be close to your family, or it could just be your friends, or whatever it might be. um, and that and just how, I think about how, like, freeing that might be if we could just rid ourselves of those emotional ties. Because I mean, they could be emotional bonds that are great, or they could be restrictions we put on ourselves, or rules that we put on ourselves about, oh no, I can't do something because it would be worried about the effects it might have on others, and that sort of thing. Um, but and well, I just leave it there for a second, because kind of lost my thought for the other side of that. But it's just, and just also realizing that not everyone has that tight family network, and some have no real, some people haven't had the experience of even knowing their parents. So all that, like what we were just mentioning, kind of comes from somewhere else. And and whether or not you have that emotional feeling of like an emotional connection with anything like that, may or may not be there.
I get some of what you're saying, because even within my family, I would say my family's pretty close, but we have, our things like any family. But I know that for me, there was one point in time I did want to move somewhere else, and I really, you know, wanted to do it. But, and I've talked about this before, but in doing that, it was weird the way my mom pointed out some aspects of uh, making. Uh, I know she did it with the best heart, and I know where it came from. But at the time, it played into part of her not wanting her kids, to be too far away from where she was at. And two, it played into my need of living for my family, but at the same point, not being sure of my own abilities to go and be somewhere else where it would be more me and nobody else around. But I wanted to experience, but because she said, well, okay, so do you have this, 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 that? And she laid out some key points. And in my head, I'm like, well, no, So it changed my decision. And then, a couple years later, I went on a different path. So where when I did move, it was just somewhere else in the city rather than out of state. And and I've always wanted to try and be that way. But then as I got older and older and older, and now it's more like, here I am 60 and I'm like, can I really do it? Can I not do it? My family, what I've developed here has become so, I don't want to say convenient, but it's convenient, but at the same point, such a huge part of my life. And what I built up here, between family, friends, all that, I would lose all that. And, what outweighs what? And, sometimes the desire sometimes to not always surmount the fear of what you're losing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, because you're looking for change, or you're looking for something new, or to a new experience, or to prove something to yourself, or to just live your life to the fullest. But then if you have that sort of a connection with someone, it's well, what am I going to be missing out on, or what am I, you know, you know, and it's kind of falls back to your values. Just not like you were saying earlier, their lawyer, Lori, it's not right or wrong. It's just kind of what we choose, and we do get the opportunity to choose that along the way. Um, but it's so easy to feel like we're victims of circumstances too, and then that can be a separate emotional restriction or tie. Um, Kenneth said, I believe he was referring to what you were saying, Dan, and spot on. He says, I was raised with avoidance. There are powerful studies on how infants respond to their caregivers. So yeah, definitely, the way we are brought up and what we experience early on um, certainly puts us on a path, and maybe without reflection and better understanding, we're unable to, or more prepared to um, kind of make the decisions. I mean, even that is part of that path. um, that we could decide to make a change, or change our path just for the sake of changing our path. Interesting. Yeah, thanks for that, Kenneth. Appreciate it. And thank you so much for reading today, Catherine. It's a wonderful reading voice that you have. And
Thank you. My pleasure. I always enjoy reading.
Yeah. And your
I
insight.
enjoy reading, but not out loud.
Yeah. So, well, I think we're past the top of the hour here. So I think I'd like to give everyone a chance for last thoughts if they want to, if they have any additional thoughts about this.
Thank you, Jason, for hosting today. And feel better soon, Samantha.
Yeah, sending lots
Yes.
of love to Samantha, and thank you, Jason, for hosting. And I, I don't know. The only last thought that came up to me was that I think, at least I can speak for myself. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to kind of buttonhole myself in with either or, making decisions either or instead of and, like I put for some reason, I'll take a situation and I'll make it, okay, I have to make this choice or this choice, or I could do this, but this instead of I could do that and I could do that. You know what I mean? Or I don't know. I just think that I needed to remind myself of that, not to do that so much. We're capable of so much more than we think we are. I love you guys. Have an awesome week.
I take it we're doing last thoughts because I had to run to the restroom. um, yeah, I love what you just said, Catherine, because I think I do that a lot to myself. I really, feel like, okay, I can only go this way or I have to make, and sometimes I get stuck in the middle and I don't make a decision and I just kind of then go off in the middle direction and that serves me no purpose when I'm and then I come down and go a little farther and it's like, well, now what? It's kind of like, you know, and if I had changed, like you said, changed the equation to, well, I can do this and that, figure out which one is the one I need to do first, go do that, and then go do the other and go from there. What harm can it do?
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to, we can do this other thing, and then hey, we can always change our mind later. So, well, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it, and I love what you were just saying there, Catherine. You are all capable of so much more than you probably think you are. So go out there and make the most of everything and have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And if you'd like, if for those who have been tuning in, look for us more on YouTube and join us here on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you all, and have a wonderful weekend.
I just want to just say to Kenneth, he jumped off already. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say for Kenneth, please come back. We would love to have him join us again. Please, pass that on to him, Catherine. It was nice having him here. He made some good points. And again, as always, I love you guys and look forward to this next week.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dan. All right. Take
Love you
care.
all. See you later.